we want to look back in terms of reflection on 2022, and then specifically move into sort of like what you saw in Q4. But do you want to give us a little summary of last year and sort of how it went for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, last year was our biggest year to date, so I'm extremely proud of the work and the results that we did. At our peak, we worked on about 70 open recs, which for me is nearly double than what we've ever worked in the previous year. We averaged at about 50 roles, the majority of them in TA. I think it was worth noting towards the end of, coming into Q4, and you may even ask me about this later, but we definitely saw a slight decline, and I think we probably finished the year probably close to about 35 to 40 roles. But again, look, immensely proud of the work. We did a lot of great work. And yeah, it was, as I said, our most successful year to date.
Yeah, it was weird. I suppose only from my side when I looked at last year, like we were so busy, especially for that first sort of like what 7-8 months in particular.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you
definitely.
say? Like it was almost so unusual that I've not seen a market like that in the US in 8 years.
Yeah, it nearly came to the point where, again, like you as my boss and me as a recruiter, it became, the point where we nearly had to kind of pick and choose who we could partner with at times.
Yeah,
It became
yeah, it
overwhelming.
was.
It became, we really need to kind of think about our clients and our relationships and where we could really truly add value. At some points, particularly the TA market became extremely volatile on both sides. Recruiters were asking for whatever they wanted. Clients weren't budging, but the roles are still there. Companies still needed to grow or aspire to grow. So it became a very, I would say aggressive market. So it's something I've personally never experienced in my 8 years here. But yeah, it was wild, particularly that first 7 months, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I can agree more with you in terms of what we were seeing, and obviously for us as a business, it made it really difficult. We wanted to hire people, then couldn't find people because they, just to your point, the TA people were getting sort of snapped up as well. But there was definitely on the back of, I suppose, the increase in interest rates, and there was definitely a bit of a slowdown, wasn't there? Like you said, towards Q4 as well.
Yeah, I definitely think companies became a lot more thoughtful. I think things changed basically towards the straight after the end of summer. So I think after Labor Day, I think that's when we started to feel a bit of a change with both clients' appetite for hiring or just spending anything on hiring and becoming a little bit more thoughtful leading into the end of the year. Obviously, things like inflation, pending recessions, some more macroeconomic kind of factors really kind of started driving, just the job market.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. And do you see that continuing? So into 2023, like if we talk about that now going forward, what do you think's going to happen with the market over there now?
Yeah, I think it's still a little bit confusing, to be honest. I think, towards the end of last
Mm.
year, there was still, high job numbers, but people are starting to get laid off and there was some confusion. I think leading into this year, that's very much the case as well. I was just reading the last US jobs report. It feels like where the US overall is at a 50% low in terms of unemployment rate. We're at 3.5%. There are definitely certain geographies and industries that are struggling to hire, particularly in things like manufacturing, hospitality, in parts of retail, all across the country. So I do think that it's conflicting, despite the headlines that you're seeing all these major layoffs within the tech world. Overall, it's still quite a tight labor market, and very much there are still shortages across the country.
Yeah, and do you know what's really funny? Like, if you look at all when spoke to Singapore earlier, and even the UK, when you look at, you're absolutely right about the labour market. Like unemployment is still sort of record low levels, and therefore it's
Mm-hmm.
creating sort of weird sort of market that exists at the minute. In terms of
Mm-hmm.
sort of like HR roles, you mentioned sort of talent acquisition last year. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that will be sort of a hot area this year, or do you think it will be different areas of HR this year?
Yeah, good question. Look, I definitely think TA will slow down a little bit. So I do think the talent or the companies that are investing in TA talent may look to think about what levels they need and what that really means. I think there'll be a shift in terms of other HR roles that start to see a spike. We're definitely
Yeah.
seeing a lot more work around HR business partners, employee relations, and talent development. So I think, a true HR business partner is definitely the person that's kind of guiding a lot of these organizations through the change, through restructures, redesigning who they are. If you think about employee relations, with again with a lot of the changes or unfortunately some layoffs, that they're really kind of taking a lead with some of that. And if I think even more forward, talent development and learning and development, a lot of companies are going to be a lot more thoughtful around who they bring in. So that means they're going to have to want to retain their talent. They're really going to be looking at the company internally first to identify new talent. And if there are populations that need to be upskilled or redesigned, guess what? It's the L&D and talent teams that are going to have to kind of help drive that. So I still expect a relatively busy year. I think it's going to be a little bit cautious for this first couple of months, but we're definitely seeing some good quality work or those types of roles in the market still.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right in terms of the market. I think I think you'll see candidates having less volume of roles because I know last year we talked to candidates that have like 3 to 5 jobs on it going on at any one time. I don't think there'll be that kind of volume, and I think you're right about companies. I think they'll be quite they'll be a little more cautious on the hiring. They won't do it quite at the pace maybe they did last year. Correct?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think there's going to be a few little other interesting variables which both candidates and clients might consider. I think with the headlines and the publicity of layoffs, employers might think that they can get talent at a bargain. And I think things like the New York pay transparency laws that came in late last year may actually mean that everyone's above board in terms of knowing what their worth is and what a role's worth. So I think that that's still going to be a lot of educating on both sides to see how that plays out. But yeah, I definitely think it'll be interesting, and the volume, definitely might be a little bit lower, but there's definitely a lot of skills there that are still needed by organizations to get them through this year.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, interestingly, you touched on, I was going to ask next, actually, pay transparency. I think that's a really key one because I think it's interesting if you source through, I think I've been through LinkedIn and certain people have certain opinions on this and certain don't. Some people think it's like this utopia that suddenly candidates are going to be able to know exactly what they're hiring for. What do you think it will do to the market over the course of this year?
Yeah, good question. I think it's going to hold people, both sides, accountable. I think you as a candidate really need to know your value. And even if and may also need to manage your own expectations. I think last year, because of HR and TA roles overall had a 20% increase in terms of salary. So I think there was a significant increase just over the course of a year. I think some people might be challenged to think, well, what am I really worth this year? And I think companies have also aligned to that, and they need to now kind of be transparent around where they need to really value roles. So do I see maybe the negotiating process to be a little bit more transactional, perhaps? I think that's where someone like myself and my team can definitely help as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it, making sure that you know your worth and know your value. And I think the other thing I would say to most people sort of listening is these things are supply and demand. Last year, people were so in demand that you probably could put a crazy number out there and possibly get it. Whereas this year, it's not going to be quite the same. So going for the crazy number could be, you might well find that clients just walk away from that.
Totally. Yeah. I think not just the numbers. I think something that really was a big trend was hybrid work, remote work. Where do you sit on that? I feel like in terms of coupling extrinsic motivations like your compensation versus work-life balance or work integration, that's going to be where people will start to flex. So I think it's looking at it more holistically rather than just I'm worth this in the market. I think you really need to kind of consider the whole opportunity.